Tell me, what's the worst thing you've ever done? I won't tell you that, but I'll tell you the worst thing that ever happened to me. The most dreadful thing.
Hello and welcome, or welcome back, as the case may be, to the Atlantean Archive. Thanks for stopping by today. Hope all of you have been doing well. It's been a while since I've been able to do a video for the channel. I've had quite a lot going on. Things have been a little topsy-turvy for us over the last couple of months. Some of you who have been following this channel for a while may have heard me say that I have special needs kids, and that can make life interesting enough just by itself without other things going on. And I also had a lot of projects. I wrote an article for the Daily Jaws just recently having to do with the 50th anniversary of the film. And one of the questions that I've always wondered about the most, after the credits start rolling and Brody and Hooper make it to shore after everything they've been through, after everything the town has been through, what does the aftermath look like? What would actually happen to the town of Amity and the major characters that were involved in that story, after all was said and done? So I wrote an article called Jaws, the Aftermath, and I'll put a link to that in the description if you want to go to the Daily Jaws and check that out. You may find that entertaining. I'll warn you in advance, though, that when they posted the article on the website, I have two articles on the Daily Jaws now. The first one compared Steven Spielberg's film to Peter Benchley's original novel. You can find that on there, too, if you're interested. But both of the articles, when they got posted to the website, all of my original formatting was done away with. So if you read the article and you're kind of like, dude, this is a mess, that's why, okay? The versions I sent were pretty clean, but when they actually got posted on the website, all that formatting went away. So if they look a little confusing, that's why. But you can check that out if you're interested in that. Also, finished up my second novel, which is another horror novel. Those of you who've been following, again, for a while on this channel, you know that I'm a writer as well as a reader. And I have written one novel to date. It's a retro-style vampire novel for those of you who grew up watching Kolchak, Dark Shadows, the original Salem's Lot, that sort of thing. That's the Dan Curtis stuff. That should be right up your alley. It was written for you. You can check out a reading of the introduction here on the channel. I'll post a link to that as well. If you've read the book, please take a few minutes to leave me, even if it's just a couple of sentences, a review on Amazon. Indie authors need all the help that they can possibly get. So I appreciate that in advance. But I will let you know a little bit more about the second novel before too long. I've got it going through a review process right now. I've got somebody reading it for me to give me some feedback on that. And I'm actually thinking that when all is said and done, and I've got the final edits done to it, that I may read it in serialized form for the channel here. So you guys may get a novel for YouTube here before too long. And be happy to get your feedback on that. It's an interesting story that it just got stuck in my head. It was an idea that would not go away. It's kind of a merger of a few ideas, but I'll get into that a little bit more in the future. Now today, I want to talk to you about one of my favorite horror novels of all time. And it's one of my favorites because it's one of the best written horror novels that I've ever read. Horror has a bad reputation overall in literary circles. There are people who don't take it seriously because they assume that all horror literature is basically extended comic book type literature, or it's like some of the worst of the genre films, blood and gore strung together with minimal plot and a lot of naked women and that sort of thing. So, but there actually is some really good horror literature out there. As a matter of fact, some of the classics of American literature are horror. You have Hawthorne, you've got Henry James, you've got Poe, you've got Lovecraft, Clark Ashton Smith, Robert E. Howard wrote some of that too. You've got some great stuff out there, and I've talked about that a little bit on the channel. And the fact that, growing up, as I'm sure many of you experienced, if you're into that kind of stuff to any degree whatsoever, and it doesn't have to be the kind of thing where people are throwing buckets of blood at the TV or whatever, you can just be reading Poe or Lovecraft or somebody like that, and people look askance at you like, what's wrong with you? I got a lot of that, especially going to Christian schools. People were okay with sci-fi, and they, some of them, maybe they worried about you if you were into Star Trek. They thought you might end up walking around with Spock ears on or something like that, but they really weren't too worried about you unless you got into the horror stuff. And then they're like, kid, what is wrong with you? You're going to end up with some demons and, all kinds of stuff that, I heard about. And I know many of you can relate to that because I've talked to you about it. But when it comes to horror, I never did really like so much the the slasher type stuff, the blood and gore, the over the top violence type things. Texas Chainsaw Massacre was not my thing. I did watch movies like Halloween, Friday the 13th, the Nightmare on Elm Street movies as a teenager. I was into that just about like everybody else I knew. And actually, last August, I reviewed the novelizations for the original Halloween and Friday the 13th, if you want to check those out. That video is posted on the channel. And actually got a little bit more out of those than I thought I would. They answered some questions, and you can get some good discussion out of it. I've got a video, as I think maybe I already mentioned, that why do nice people like horror to begin with? What the heck? Why are you into this stuff? So you might be interested in checking that out if somebody ever gives you the squint eye over this kind of stuff. Send them a copy of the video, see what they think about that. But this particular novel stands out to me because, unlike other things I could point to in the horror genre and other genres, as well for that matter, it's not exclusive to horror. Bad writing is by no means exclusive to horror. But this is an example of extremely good writing. It's a gothic type novel. It has that feel to it, and that is Ghost Story, a 1981 novel by Peter Straub, one of the best known modern American horror writers. And when I say that it's gothic, that was quite on purpose. Straub has commented that when he was preparing to write this novel, he went out and he read Poe, he read Hawthorne, he read Henry James, he read Lovecraft. He dove into that kind of stuff to understand what makes classic American supernatural literature, and more or less to try to find his own place in it and to see what he could do with a work like that. The novel was a great success and was adapted into a film starring Fred Astaire, which I've seen part of a very long time ago. I need to check that out. I know it got lackluster reviews. If you've seen it, you remember it, tell me what you think in the comments. And if you've read this book, tell me what you think in the comments. Give me some feedback here to the things that I'm saying about the book. Now, getting into it, as I mentioned, it's an absolutely excellent book, and it has the qualities that I look for most in this genre, which is suspense and atmosphere with a good story and believable characters. All of that in spades. As a matter of fact, there are sections of this book that I would classify as brilliant. They are just astonishingly well written. Things that, you look at and you're like, gosh, I wish I had written that. So absolutely wonderful. I'll get into it here with hopefully a minimal of spoilers for you. I might get into a little more spoilery stuff toward the end for those of you who have seen it, because I'd like some feedback on, your thoughts on it, but I'll warn you before I get into that. So Ghost Story takes place in the town of Milburn, which is in Upper New York State. Again, the year is 1981 when this is written, when it takes place. And it concerns a group of 4 older men. These men are in their 70s. They comprise a group known as the Chowder Society. And these guys get together once a month in formal attire, like dinner dress, and to smoke and to drink and to tell each other horrible stories. And this has evolved over time, as is rather evident in the story, as a way for all 4 of them to compensate for something that happened in their youth. As with many horror tales, many tales of the supernatural, these guys, who have been friends all of their lives, had an incident occur when they were very young men, and they have covered it up ever since then. This is a secret amongst the 4 of them, something they have always worried would get out, something that haunts them, something they're still not entirely sure. What exactly did we see? What exactly happened here? And more to the point, what exactly did we do? And, what could be the repercussions of it? And even though no one ever found out about it, these men have still gone through the years with this lingering feeling that there's something that could rise up out of the past bent on a reckoning. Originally, there were 5 men in the Chowder Society. There was a man by the name of Edward Wanderley, who was killed 1 year previous to the events of Ghost Story. It happened under strange circumstances, and his friends ever since then have been haunted by the idea, the feeling, that it was not an accident. It appeared to be an accident, but they don't think it was. They think there was foul play involved, and they don't think it was foul play of the ordinary sort. They think that there may be a supernatural agency behind this that is gunning for them at this point, and that after all of these decades have transpired since the events that they are keeping secret between the 4 of them, it seems like it's now chosen its time to come around for a reckoning. At this point, other things begin to happen in the town of Milburn, strange circumstances, deaths begin to take place. People see strange things in the night. They see these dark shapes with these burning red eyes. A farmer's cows are exsanguinated, and there appears to be no explanation for it. There are no footprints around the bodies, any of this kind of thing. So things begin to ratchet up as the story develops. There's an eeriness, there's a presence that seems to be settling over the town of Milburn, and it's not just the four men of the Chowder Society who feel that something is very, very wrong in the town of Milburn. Now, their friend, Mr. Wanderley, has a nephew who is a sometimes professor, also writer, who lives on the West Coast, and he has recently written a book called The Night Watchers concerning supernatural creatures. And I won't go into that too much. I guess that would give too much of the story away for those of you who haven't read it. But based on the type of story that he's written, the men begin to get the feeling that he may perhaps have the key to the mystery. He may understand what it is that they're actually fighting, being a writer himself and having done research for that kind of a novel. You know, he may know what's really going on. And more than that, he may be able to help them get a handle on it and actually find out what, if anything, that they can do to circumvent the fate that seems to be tracking them down. So that'll give you basically a prompt as far as the main story goes. And I should mention, too, by the way, that Don Wanderley, who is the nephew that I just mentioned, he has also just been through an incredible experience recently that reminds him of the novel that he wrote. It has very strong supernatural overtones. He knows something's going on in the background with that. And when he gets his letter from the members of the Chowder Society, he feels like fate is drawing him towards some sort of a confrontation. So you've got this build up, these individual threads that Straub starts off, and he weaves the tale, and slowly everything begins to come together till about the middle of the book, when you begin to get more of a definite idea of what exactly is going on. Now, again, very, very well written. There's some great atmosphere in this book. There's some moments of true suspense in it. There are some times when you're reading the book, and I don't get this feeling very often from horror literature, but there are moments when I'm reading it that it really does kind of give you that goosebumps feel. There are some moments that really stand out. I originally read this book over 20 years ago, and there were some scenes that I remembered from it. I couldn't remember overall how good of a book it was, and I don't remember why I didn't pick it up. You know, I hadn't read it again since, but I decided it was time to reread Ghost Story. And getting into it, and all of those scenes just came back, and I thought, yeah, this really was done very well. It was done very effectively. So it has that gothic feel to it. It has that classic American supernatural tale to it, not surprising at all, again, due to all of the reading that Straub did in preparation for writing it. Also, as I was going through the story, something else stood out to me. There was another very familiar sense that I got in reading this book. The way that the story was structured, the way the characters were written, the way that certain segments were presented as if, you're watching something on screen almost. The types of characters that you're dealing with, and the nature of the town of Milburn itself. All of it reminded me very strongly of Salem's Lot by Stephen King, which I consider to be one of the best novels that he's written of all the plethora that he's written. I haven't read nearly all of them by any means, but of the ones that I've read, I think Salem's Lot is one of his best novels. Again, another review on this channel. I do a deep dive review, rather boring, but if you've got some time to kill, you want to check that out. I'll put a link to that as well. But as I began to read through it, I just got the sense that this was heavily inspired by Salem's Lot. It's got that feel to it, and so much that harkens back to it. So after I got done reading the book, I went out and did some Googling on it, and found out that Peter Straub directly attributes Salem's Lot, he definitely credits it, I should say, with the way that he wrote Ghost Story. He said that after having written previous material, that he was looking to do something, as he put it, on a larger canvas. He wanted a larger cast of characters. He wanted to do something on a bigger scale. And he said that reading Salem's Lot taught him how to do that without getting buried in a ton of secondary characters. So yeah, definitely. If you've read Salem's Lot and you like that book, you'll probably like Ghost Story. You will at the very least see the stylistic similarities between Straub and King on that. And of course, Straub and King went on, to collaborate on the Talisman, two Talisman books. I've only read the first of them. And that was, I liked Ghost Story better than that. And I have read a couple of other of Straub's books as well. The first one I read was Julia. That came highly recommended as a supernatural, suspenseful, atmospheric book. I read Julia, I read Lost Boy, Lost Girl, The Talisman, and then this. And of all of those books, Ghost Story is definitely my favorite. So I highly recommend it to you if you like that kind of horror, if you're into that kind of literature in general. Very good cast, again, very believable characters. The female characters in this book are also very well written, especially Stella Hawthorne, who is the wife of one of the Chowder Society members. She's done very well. You know, the way that women are portrayed in sci-fi and horror sometimes, not all that great. Cardboard, you know, sex symbol, pinup girl type stuff sometimes. But these women are very well fleshed out. And that was another enjoyable aspect of the novel, and they have their own role to play in the story. So I will say, if you're going to read this, you know, when I first started reading it, the first few chapters they kind of leave you feeling like, what on earth am I reading, and do I want to? You know, there are people who are into shock type literature, and I'm not at all into that. And I began to wonder if that's what this was when I first started reading it. I won't give it away, but the way the story is framed, what's going on screen, as it were, I'm just like, do I really want to read this? I mean, is this what I was sold on by the people who told me you really, really, really need to read this novel? Let me put it like this. It's not what it appears to be at first. And when you get past that section, as you get into it, you'll understand more. And then, you know, later on, he comes back to it. And after that, you know, by that point, you've been through the whole body of the story. You know what's going on, and it'll make a whole lot more sense. But at the very beginning, I just remember being, I don't know about this. This is not my kind of thing. But yeah, if you feel that way when you're first starting it out, I would encourage you to persevere, because it's not what it looks like. I'll put it like that without trying to spoil it anymore for you. Now, I've noticed a couple of comments. I went out and read the Amazon reviews on this, and just wanted to respond to a little bit of that. There are some people who will say the book is overly long, that certain things should have been trimmed down. And it really comes down to a matter of taste. If you are a reader of Stephen King, and a reader particularly of classic fiction, if you can get through Lovecraft and his vocabulary, Clark Ashton Smith and guys like that, you'll probably be fine with this. It is a bit of a lengthy book, and to be fair, there were some sections I thought maybe did bog down and could have used some trimming. But I'm also the kind of person who really gets into story and character. And I'm willing, as long as I'm interested in the plot, and as long as it's being well written and it's well handled, you know, I'm willing to go along for the ride. I'm willing to take a few side trips with the characters. I'm willing to get some of that background information. To me, as a writer, it's fascinating as well. But just as somebody who enjoys a good story and wants to see something fleshed out that I can really get into and relate to, a world that I can enter for the time that I've got that book open, then, you know, I was fine with it. I didn't find it overly too much there. Yeah, you could trim some stuff again, but I didn't really think all that much. And another criticism that I saw of the book was certain people were saying that it's too obvious where it's going. You realize what you're dealing with as to the nature of the supernatural threat, and you know where the story's going. So, you know, it seems like they seem to indicate that Straub is beating around the bush a little bit, trying to conceal something from you that is too obvious. You already know where it's going, so he doesn't hide that very well. And I don't actually think it's a matter of Straub trying to be coy with it or anything. He's not dumb. He knows that you, as the reader, have the God's eye view. You've got sort of the omniscient view of what's going on here. You see all the characters and everything going on that they don't see. You see all of the various threads coming together, and you've got enough material to work with that you've probably got a good idea of what's going on behind the scenes and where the story's going, even if you don't have certain details. I think, again, it's just a matter of how relatable the characters are. If you can really get into a story, and you can take a journey with the characters, you can sort of merge with the situation and immerse yourself into the story, you're not going to care about that so much. You know, it works a little bit differently with film, but it reminds me sort of that moment, speaking of slasher stuff and Halloween, of that moment in the original Halloween, where Michael has killed everybody in the house across the street. Lori is babysitting the kids. She's put them to bed, and she can't get anybody to pick up the phone. She thinks they're screwing around with her. So she leaves the house and walks across the street to the other house. Now, you know everybody's dead in there. You know Michael's in there someplace. You know what's going to happen ultimately. But it builds up the suspense because you know what the character that you're following doesn't know. And it works a little bit differently with literature. But if you can immerse yourself into the story and take that journey, then you can derive a lot of the same effect by immersing yourself in the thoughts and the reactions of the characters as the story develops. So, yeah, there are stories I've read where authors were trying to do something that they telegraph too soon, but it becomes too obvious what they're doing. And it's like, okay, you're not hiding this real well, and it's obvious. You get that a lot with less experienced writers, I find, and stories that don't take themselves very seriously to begin with, where you've got cookie cutter type characters and that sort of thing. That's not the case with Ghost Story. So I thought I would address those things. Leave me your thoughts in the comments here. Let me know what you think about that. Am I right? Am I wrong? What do you enjoy about this book? For those of you who have read it, what do you think of it? And at this point, I guess I will get into it just a little bit more spoilery information. So if you're concerned about reading the book and you don't want to be spoiled on it, you might want to tune out at this point. Thank you for watching. But I found that what Straub did with the idea of a race of not necessarily supernatural, but just different beings that are humanoid in appearance, extremely long-lived. They're shapeshifters and virtually immortal. They can take the shape of just about anything that you're afraid of. It kind of feeds into the Pennywise, it type of thing. And that's been done, of course, in horror before. That idea that your nightmares take the shape of whatever it is you're afraid of. So that's not new to Straub. But I think he does it very well here. And the idea being, of course, that all of the horror movie type monsters and all of the legends in history, the vampires, the werewolves, the other creatures of the night, that sort of thing, all of them are really just manifestations of one thing that's been screwing with humanity since the very beginning. It's been here a lot longer than we have. It is in many ways mentally and physically superior to us. I thought that was a good way to look at it, and a good explanation, and something that you can really work with, because you're dealing with a creature that can adapt itself to any situation. It can be whatever it needs to be. If it needs to be Dracula to scare you to death, or if it needs to be the Wolfman or whatever, it can do that. And I think Straub makes pretty good use of that. There were some times when I wished he had gone into maybe a little bit more detail, such as the Fenny and his brother. For those of you who will remember the two brothers in the story, what exactly are they? They're not quite what Alma Mobley is. She seems to be the pure form of this entity that we're dealing with. These guys appear to be some kind of a hybrid. So, how does that work? Do they ultimately, over a span of time, mature into what she is? Because there are certain things about them, like they have this reek about them. They have this animalistic nature to them that Alma and her kind do not have. So I would have been interested in getting a little bit more from Straub on that, and seeing, exactly what are these things? Are they, drones, worker bees, that sort of thing? It would have been interesting to get just a little bit more on that. Would also, there were a couple of side characters there that he could have tracked down. What did you think of the ending, for those of you who have read it? Obviously, he kills one of them, and he's setting his sights on another one. The story ends with him saying that he has to go track down a Mrs. Dufries, I think, out west. And we know that she is whatever Alma Mobley was. So we get into that, and, you kind of wonder, how that would have worked out. But it's not something that needs a sequel or anything like that. But it was just an interesting idea that he's going to continue to carry this on and try to eliminate all the ones that he's familiar with anyway. You wonder again, how many of these creatures are there? How widespread are they? Are they concentrated in certain areas? They seem to like to blend in with humans, and they like to play games. The way Alma Mobley will change her name, but she always has the first name starts with an A, the last name starts with an M. So she's playing these games and this pantomime throughout the ages with various people. So that was an interesting aspect of it. But those were a couple of comments I wanted to throw in for those of you who have actually read the book and can't be spoiled on that type of material. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. Let me know how you thought Straub handled that. Whether he should have done more with it, whether he gave us too much. Some people, they want it almost all to be mysterious, so they think it went too far. So anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. Those of you who have subscribed to the channel, thank you for that. The channel has grown much more than I ever thought that it would. I didn't think anybody would want to sit and listen to me drone on about this kind of stuff, but apparently a lot of you are bored out there, so I appreciate that. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. Please consider sharing the video, the channel, any of the content here with anyone you think may be interested. If you're interested in supporting what I do, consider picking up a copy of my book, Descend in Darkness. Again, I'll put the links down below where you can get that. It's available on paperback and Kindle, and every once in a while I do a free Kindle promotion where, over the course of 2 or 3 days, you can get it for free. Just as a free Kindle download. And if you have read it, again, please do leave me a review, even if it's only a couple of sentences on Amazon. When you're an indie author, every little bit of support you can get helps. So I appreciate all of that. Well, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, God bless.